I would like to welcome you all and thank you for joining our webinar about the top portfolio risks. We have a great speaker lineup and we'll cover a variety of content from how product leaders should be thinking about the danger of falling into the portfolio risks, knowing what they are, knowing how to address them to set your company up for long-term success. So just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. My name is Baji. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer. Really excited to be hosting this webinar with Dragonboat and inviting Cynthia. We are recording, so I'll be sharing the recording and the slides after the fact. And we'll have Q&A at the end. So as you have questions throughout the day, feel free to submit them through the chat and then we'll capture them all at the end. We have about 15 to 20 minutes saved for that. For those who don't know, Dragonboat is a product portfolio management platform with a mission to empower outcome-focused teams. So we're really working with CPOs to help identify and mitigate these portfolio risks. We're adopted by over 1,000 product teams in 20 countries. And with that, I'll kick it over to the speakers and introduce Becky and Cynthia. So Becky Flint is our CEO and founder. She built and scaled product portfolio management for PayPal, BigCommerce, Shutterfly, and Feedzai. She founded Dragonboat in 2018 to bring an integrated product portfolio platform to product leaders to help strategize, prioritize, deliver, and improve industry-leading products. Cynthia has spent the last 20 years in various tech companies working across domains, including Okta, VMware, and IBM, to seek out opportunities to coordinate and streamline strategic planning, decision-making, and communication in pursuit of achieving business goals. So, two excellent speakers, excited to pass the ball over and start digging into the key portfolio risks. Welcome, Becky and Cynthia.
Thank you, Baji.
Thank you, Baji.
So, well, nice meeting you, everyone. I know we have audience from all over the world. So for those of you who came from Asia, from some of the other time zones, quite late. So thank you. Hopefully this one is an informative and be excited to talk to you and have some dialogue towards the later part of the session as well. And I want to just call out briefly. So I'm Becky, as Baji shared earlier. Through my career, I worked with a lot of product leaders and scaled multiple product teams. What we found out is that successful companies today are built on empowered teams. And Marty Kagan, who is the founder and CEO of Silicon Valley Product Group, he had recently published a book called Empowered, which is amazing, by the way. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. One of the things he called out is something that I have also observed in my career, is that empowered teams are key to the success of the company, but doesn't mean they don't require management. They require different kind of management. They require a better management. And that's really the essence of why we talk about the portfolio risk, in that when you provide the guideline alignment to your teams, that you would empower them to innovate, to deliver, to build. But at the same time, someone got to keep an eye on what could be catastrophic things happen so that we won't fail as a whole. Failure at the smaller level is expected, but failure as a whole can be devastating, and we have to keep an eye on and make sure we prevent them as we can. So with that, so one of the first thing is so we are talking about the four portfolio risk, and then one of the first thing is the strategic misalignment risk. As you can see on the side of the image, where the empowered teams can go ahead and build things, even if they were given, a clear alignment on goals, right? We want to go to the other side. That doesn't mean that there's no other risk, and the strategic risk is one of the top challenge for that. So with that, I will pass it over to Cynthia, and then she can share a little bit more of her stories.
Yeah, thank you, Becky. Being in technology for more than 20 years now and working for, small organizations all the way through large enterprise, this is a really key risk that needs to be paid attention to. strategy is often set by executives or leaders because they're out in the field and they're communicating and they're looking at market trends. The chief product officer be a key person to figure out what a strategy would be for an organization from 1 to 3 years. But if that is not articulated in a way where the implementing teams can really understand the context of why a decision has been made, to be able to develop toward the solution, that's where you can get that misalignment. I think of an example in one of my previous organizations with regards to a merger and acquisition of a technology company. This is pretty common in technology where, organizations are purchasing other companies, whether it's for the tech stack that they offer, whether it's to expand their product portfolio, or to hire talent that's super talented and moving quickly in innovation. And I've seen in an example of M&A where there was a workflow technology purchased, and one interpretation of integration was, oh, we're going to take this technology and integrate it into our existing product. Another interpretation from a different team was, oh no, we're going to integrate it into the corporate internal system so that we use it internally for workflows. And a third interpretation of integration was, actually, we're going to integrate it into our platform as a new product offering. And so these types of interpretations have to be kind of vetted, and bringing the leaders together, bringing the implementation teams together in a multidisciplinary conversation will help bring out these misalignments that you didn't really understand that you had. So, redefining the term, what does platform mean? Redefining what does integration mean for our organization, and then really setting, okay, this is the strategy, here is why, here's the market that we're going after, and here are the requirements on what we hear that they need. So that's one way to mitigate the strategic misalignment.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I think, the very simple things as the phase versus the scope could cause major differences. So the example Cynthia mentioned definitely have experience in other places where we have a goal and where the different iterations or phases we consider as you can build it as add-on, you have the standalone, and then you can expand it to partners. But because the phase and the iteration wasn't called out, so that you have a different team work on different phase at the same time. So having a strategic misalignment risk, it causes significant impact to your portfolio. So we're going to talk a little bit more how to address them down the road. So with that, I'm moving to a second part that's related to the first one, which is a prioritization risk. And many of you, I'm not sure you're familiar with this illustration, right? So basically it says that the elephant goes in the village, there are 6 blind men and women was kind of trying to feel what it is, and depending on the part of the elephant's body, they think it's something different. And that's kind of illustrative to most of the organizations that when we are at a certain size or when we don't work with everyone all the time, it's really hard to see the bigger picture, where there's something you call the local optimization, right? So we prioritize on something that we know based on what we know. And that, one example you can see is that you go to a product team or product manager, and he or she would have a list, and that's being pre-prioritized based on whatever criteria and scope. But when you put everything together, you realize, and one person's top 3, at the holistic level, it doesn't really matter at all. And where someone else is like a top 10 at the very bottom list actually has a much bigger impact. So as the product leaders, being able to see that across and help understand, provide a context across the board is a super, super critical. And I think Cynthia has a good story to tell here as well.
Yeah, definitely. This is also a problem, especially when you're rather large organization and you have multiple product lines in a portfolio where all of a sudden you have to sort of shift your paradigm and think more of an end-to-end offering for value for the customer rather than a product-centric prioritization. One example of this would be, delivering an agent that would sit on a server and gather information and send it back to the main app for analysis and data visualization. This agent, one of my previous organizations, was leveraged by multiple products. And so you have a piece of, we called it a shared service, which is, a piece of software leveraged by multiple products in different ways. And how does that agent team prioritize against the various competitive tensions in each of the products? And so what we did as an organization, we took this step to say, okay, instead of thinking of product silos, let's talk about portfolio prioritization and the top 10 initiatives that will move the needle for our business. And so just by working with the cross product leaders on and having them engage in what those priorities were at a business level, they were able to come together, dialogue, dispute which should be a higher priority, and then have a top 10. And we would track the top 10 progress through the different stages of development on a quarterly basis to see, okay, how are we doing? Have we finished our discovery, and do we know that this priority will continue? How are we doing in development for this second priority? Are we hitting our milestones? Have we wrapped up our third priority so that we can move on and add a new priority to the top 10? But we would definitely start all of the QBRs with the top 10 and review our status, red, yellow, green, what's blocking, have conversations around, do we need to change the direction of this priority? Do we need to deprioritize it? So just being able to have people aligned on the priorities across the different product groups really made a difference.
Right, Cynthia, you're totally right. I think in the digital product, most of the company would have to build today. Even if you are a relatively small team, you could have faced things like, you could have, customer facing elements of their product or teams, and then you could have sort of the infrastructure shared, right? The platform, the logins, the authentications, the fraud or whatever, the shared work stream or product team. And therefore that when you prioritize it by product team, which typically happens, and without the context, which is in the strategic framework, and also without understanding of the goal, then each team would have a different list of prioritization. And then you basically, one is the prioritization is different, and two is the different prioritization would plus dependency, then it will get into endless circle that people just going around and try to figure out how to get my stuff done. So understanding that prioritization needs to happen both at the team level and across the all teams in the product organization, regardless of your one product portfolio or multiple product team, but it's one multiple product portfolio. The prioritization risk really happens when there's no overarching way to tie things together. So prioritize based on local knowledge. So with that said, I'm going to move to the third one, which is the delivery risk. And as you can see, it's kind of like flowing through, right? Once we have a different prioritization by different team, if we have a different prioritization by different team, and we have dependencies, which in the way of building, software, it's almost always dependency. There's almost no product can be built by one team all the time. And then you start to have people rely on each other, and you get delayed, you get external delayed, and you get internal blocks, and it's a chaos. So with that, I want to send to Cynthia once again and hear some more of her experience and stories.
Yes, thank you. So Becky, I've seen, if you look at the map there on the left, the lull, what you're trying to do here for your delivery risk, one risk of it is the time to the value. And so you want to really reduce those lulls in between work so that work can flow very smoothly from one team to the next, whether it's, the implementation of something to the messaging to the market, and how to tie those things together. Recently, I've spent time doing a discovery process. I found that if there's not enough time, we like to be agile, but teams need time to discover what the real requirements will be for a particular solution. And so introducing a semi-formal discovery phase of what is the type of information that's needed to bring then the cross-functional teams together to discuss, here's the problem that we're trying to solve. Here are the requirements that we have to fulfill. Now let's brainstorm the solution. Just even having an hour before a project starts to go through a discovery phase will save a lot of time down the road, because things that a product manager may come up with from a requirements perspective, they may not understand from a technology piece what is feasible or not feasible. And so just having those conversations cross-functionally before a project goes into an implementation state saves a lot of time in the future. The other thing is having an intake process. So if it can be lightweight, you don't need a heavy intake process. But let's go back to that agent scenario where, you know, the agent team was competing for resources and competing for new features for the different products. By establishing a simple intake process where any of the product teams could submit their intake with enough information, and then we would do monthly reviews on those intakes, then the team can go and make sure they understand the requirements, get those things in the backlog as needed. And so, you know, the two things that I've found very valuable, they can be lightweight, they can be as formal as you need it, but the discovery process to really understand what you're going after and what potential solutions are, and the intake process, which would document those things and give the requirements and the proposed solutions to those implementing teams.
Right. So awesome, Cynthia. I think that the one thing you call out is very interesting is, I think there are two things, right? One is, how do we know that every time we would have, every team faces delivery risk? What is concerning is sort of the alert system where we need to pay attention is to see how it has progressively getting worse. You know, as the software is being built by multiple teams, there will always be some sort of overlapping. There will always be some level of dependencies and potential blocking. And then the idea is to see how much of the blocking, the law that Cynthia showed on the left, is started to expand. And one of the things where I noticed is that, you know, whenever a team size at the 3 or 4, or you know 3 or 4 times that again, it started to actually has a very different level of complexity. So when you have 2-3 teams, it's somewhat manageable. When you double that amount or triple that amount, it becomes very different. So then your planning, your alignment, your scheduling became more critical. And one way to also identify this delivery risk that started to affect your product and ultimately the outcome to the customer is to start tracking them. So the way, figure out some of the ways of identify laws. And then one of the example is if you use Epic and if you use stories, and you may want to see like how much of your tickets are part of the Epic, and then how much your task is actually outside the Epic. Because what happens is that when you have your team working on product and features, that's quote unquote planned roadmap, that most of the things will fall within the Epic frame. So when they blocked, what typically happens is they pull something else. So that's where an example for you to say, hey, one, it feels like we're not delivering as much as we thought. It feels like we're slower, but I don't have data to back it up. So look at that. That will be example to show how much of the things were not planned and they were not emergency. Obviously, you could have issues and bugs, but you have a not planned but not emergency. That is an example to show you some concern here, and look into it to see what cadence. It could be intake process, could be your quarterly planning, or somewhat of an overall alignment, and a little bit of investment up front to understand the needs and dependencies and approaches across multiple teams. It yields a huge return on that. I know we spend a little bit more time on here, but we do know one of the challenges is when you have lots of agile teams, empowered teams, the collaboration was, and collaboration as well as coordination was not spoken about very much, and a lot of teams actually struggle with this. So happy to talk more about that. But before we spend more time, Cynthia, you want to add more to this?
No, I really love the way you've mentioned that, because it's true. When you're heads down working, delivering something, you're focused, and therefore you're not thinking in a broad manner. You're focused on the problems at hand. I've seen in a particular organization where there are certain members of the team, specifically product managers, UX designers, often DevOps talent, where they are sort of temporary members of a team. And so they will have that broader knowledge of the different things moving on, because they're kind of joining these delivery teams as needed. And so that's another model that works pretty well, to have people temporary teams during delivery, but being able to see the bigger picture across things.
Right. That's awesome. So I wanted to add one more thing here, then before we move on next slide, is sometimes I got people ask the question, say, hey, we're product managers and we're agile, so deliver kind of on time is not really an agile product management thing, feels like a waterfall. So one of the things I think is really important is that you don't need to deliver everything quote unquote on time, but there are critical elements of your product that needs to be delivered to commitment, because we do in every business need to commit to our customers and the stakeholders, because maybe partners on certain things, because they have their downstream activity. That could be a marketing campaign, could be closing a deal, could be they will make an announcement, or they have a downstream work to plan on their side. So deliver to commitment is essential to empower a team, because if a product team cannot deliver their commitment, that will erode the trust from everyone else, not just their leaders, all the cross-functional teams. Then they will not be empowered anymore. You will have micromanagement coming from the leaders, say, what happened? Why it's not delivered? They want to have everything. So it's interesting of how deliver to commitment, not everything, but critical. And empowered teams, it's almost like the air and the water, they do kind of have to both exist. Otherwise, missing one will cause impact to the other. So just want to call out, and in one quote I had really left the impression early in my career, is that one of the CRO, Chief Revenue Officer, from a pretty well-known a CRM company, and I won't name, said he had to leave the company because the product team cannot deliver. They always overpromise and they always miss delivery. And he had very angry customers and very angry prospects and very angry team members because they couldn't deliver, or they they just rush in and cause a lot of trouble. So he had to leave, and sure that caused both, obviously the company talent and a significant impact to the company. And the product team later on suffered a lot of micromanagement to see what's going on. So I think a delivery risk is something that product teams do have to earn to really gain the trust and empowerment of others from the other functions. So this one is not very much talked about. So I want to just pop it here, opportunity risk. And every decision we make means there are a lot of decisions opportunity we say no. So product teams in particular makes lots of prioritization decisions. So as things come along, so when we made prioritization decisions, and when we decided what to build, and we also made decisions that a bunch of things that we won't do, but the world's changing, we could be around all the time. So when we find out more information, when the features and product we take to market, it performed the way we wanted, or it didn't perform the way we wanted, or something new come about, what do we do? And so what opportunity risk, it's a higher level of risk, but really differentiate a lot on a successful product organization that can understand opportunities and being able to adjust to it. A not very successful product organization is not measure their outcome or not being able to nimble and they respond to new opportunities or threats so that they move slow and ultimately things move out the door. So with that said, I will pass it on to Cynthia.
Yeah, this one is fun because if you think about Ray Kurzweil, how he spoke about the accelerated rate of change, and especially in technology where, you know, the competition is really driven by ideas and ideation and time to market. And so if things are speeding up faster and faster, the companies need to have a way to assess the opportunity against what's currently in their backlog, in their prioritization, and determine, do we make a change in plan? So my recent organization, the way we started to handle this, we moved away from, we still did annual planning because you need to understand what your budget is working on, but moved closer to quarterly planning and monthly planning so that any opportunities that would come in could be reassessed against the current portfolio and then determined whether or not you close something in order to open the doors to the new opportunity. The federal program at Okta is a key piece. And so we determined through conversation from sales, product management, security, product development, engineering, looked at that opportunity and said, no, this is really important. We're looking at the way technology is moving, what's going on for technology companies today with all the hacking, and all in all, putting the priority of federal compliance and all of those measures in place is a good move overall for the organization. And so, you know, we take that, we look at the market and we assess it against, you know, what was currently in flow. And then you can decide, do we hire more? Do we reallocate resources and put capacity on this new opportunity, which at Okta we have. The federal program is really important.
Right. And it's very interesting you mentioned about the rate of a change as well, the rate of our, how we operate. And that's really, in some ways that the bigger we are, we tend to become more complex. There tend to be more dependencies, and tend to be, you make one change, you actually would have to move lots of interconnected pieces. So if you really think about the flow we've gone through in terms of the delivery risk and then the prioritization risk, and then the strategic misalignment risk, really tied to this opportunity risk as well. And I want to share one example where one of the customers we're working with is that they are in the payment industry, where they have lots of product offerings, the legacy system was the older way of doing things is like whenever you have a new use case, so for example, we do ACH or we do, we send money or others, they would just build a whole component and module. It's very fast. But then once you reach a certain number of product, it becomes slow because there's a lot of shared component. So then whenever you build a full product, each on its own, the shared component is not being used, but then each product you need to maintain them. So then the cost of maintenance and improvement on the part that's a standalone over time became more costly than the saving. So then, a better practice was taken in place to take out the shared components, create more services, and so on. So it's great we'll have a more modular product and have shared services, and then you have, scalability and all that. But that also means whenever you want to build something, you need to use the shared services where you have multiple teams and multiple opportunities come along, where you have more dependencies, and then you have to trade off a broader audience. So what that really means is that when we run a product and it has multiple elements, there's always trade-off. You could have a scalability, flexibility, modular product, which by default introduce more dependencies. So when you make prioritization on one side, and that you essentially also should consider opportunity cost or trade-off on the other side. And the more you don't have visibility, the more you think about the way that each product manager think about it, because they're running their area, the more you introduce the opportunity risk where you cannot respond quickly, you block each other, and that overall is actually a negative to the product and the business as a whole. So and just interestingly, so each of these risks are really intertwined with each other, right? They're not just saying opportunity risk, I adjusted and I won't have, because if you do adjust, for example, strategic misalignment risk, it helps with your prioritization, not in silos. When you have, when you address the delivery risk, it helps with you understanding the opportunity risk better and adjust them better.
Yeah, there's no one story that fits all of them, right? These are all interconnected, and that's why it's risk in general. But these are sort of filters on a way to approach where are our problems, where is the bottleneck, what do we need to change? I think opportunity risk in particular, if you think about humans and how we like to, we have status quo, right? Where our brain is designed or built to make sure we have this equilibrium in our bodies, to have a consistent temperature. And you think about companies where we develop routines, and so change management is really the tool to help with the opportunity risk, because you can assess something and then assess the impacts on the current and figure out your change management process so that impact, people don't get upset because things are changing, because things will change. And so having that change management and have people understand, the change management and what you go through to assess, figure out the impacts, what's the communication, how do you check in with people to make sure they've bought in on this new change? If they haven't, how do you persuade them to be sure that they are an advocate for the new change? So I think change management process is really key here.
Right. So I think we kind of broadly covered the 4 portfolio risk, and definitely want to talk a little bit more about how we address them. We kind of briefly touch upon each one of them, but we can spend a little bit more time on here. So obviously, strategic misalignment risk is probably at one of the highest level, and that's something, if regardless of your product leaders, or sometimes you're even in program management or product management, you can identify that. So people have a different focus that, if we never build a cohesive framework, now, not like saying you're going to spend 6 months and do the strategy, put the deck together and walk away. And that's exactly what's causing the strategic misalignment risk, which is you did all the strategies and everything else in the PowerPoint deck format and just stay somewhere. They never really create a context and permeate through your product organization, so that when your team doing the next level of strategy, building up their pieces and their focuses, that created a lot of misalignment there. And the second part of the prioritization risk, we kind of alluded to a little bit, is on how siloed prioritization really is causing a sort of a local optimization and loss of big picture. And when we think about prioritization, we can't think about, most of you have, if you're in product management, you probably heard of like a 25,000 prioritization method, right? The whatever scoring, whatever numbers, whatever things. And that is good, but it has to be step 2. Step 1 has to be say, what do we prioritize against, towards what? Because if, let's say, if the company is growing very rapidly, you have lots of new customers, but you are churning, you can the prioritization at the highest level and the growing, it won't at the overall level really create the best impact, because your churn is too high. So that's where the strategic alignment on where our focus now or for the next month or quarter as a company, as a product team, should be one of the factors and the key deciding factors before we prioritize things within that. That's where portfolio really come into play, where when you think about the strategic framework, where our focus is on, let's say, instead of growing new customers as a part of the growth strategy, we're going to make sure retaining and expanding existing customers will be our key focus, at least for the short term and near and the midterm. Is a key focus across a company, because we're not growing, because overall it's losing. And that strategy would trickle down to the team. So then when you prioritize, you really prioritize it towards that goal. You not prioritize it based on some scoring that has no association with your goal at all, right? So I want to pass on this to, and Cynthia, would you like to add something?
Yeah, definitely. What we found has worked in a couple of organizations I've seen. Some organizations use OKRs, so objectives and key results. Other organizations use what we call VMTs, so your vision, your mission, and your targets. And so that you can pass on the thematics, like you said, we're going to expand the customer base, or we're going to, get renewals, and those will be that vision or the method by which you'll, objectively target your results. And then the targets could be the individual teams working cross-functionally to say, okay, in order to expand in a new vertical, we're going to add these features. In order to support renewals, we're going to, listen to those customers. And that's how you can sort of cascade down the themes and the goals to across the organization.
Right. And I think ultimately that as a product manager or product leader, you would say, how does it apply to me? If you run a product team, you have a multiple product manager working for you or under your team, this become a lot more important, because you always need to make sure that the highest strategic intent and approach, right? To go back to first slide, we had the bridge versus the tunnel, that, if you don't communicate and share with your team, we're going to build a bridge or we're going to build a tunnel, that's bound to happen in terms of how the approach will be taken. And obviously then from there, your team can do their prioritization and innovation on how these goals can be achieved. So that, it's obviously makes more sense as a product leaders. Now, if you're individual product managers or your program manager, other members of the team, does it matter to you? Sure, it matters to you. Ultimately, every person, either in product management, program management, or engineering management, you help guide your team to do the thing that adds the most value. And it is your job to find out what is our strategy across the team, how we should prioritize it towards that strategy. If you don't, the rest team will follow, the general go to the wrong place, right? So it's really critical for you, both in terms of understanding and clarifying, if not, so that we don't have, sometimes you have a loss in translation in terminology, right? People say something like, we're gonna launch this, or we're gonna, sometimes it means launch this down the road. We actually had multiple phases, so need to really clarify the terminology and then direction and somewhat of a time horizon, right? So, and that
the other thing to that, Becky, I'd love to add is the success criteria or the definition of done, so that when your resources will be free to work on other things. So part of the prioritization and the delivery piece is that, if you reach the definition of done and you can measure that, you can formally close an effort, and that makes everyone feel happy. We've accomplished something and we can move on. Or you can sort of, going through your backlog grooming, determine approximately, which quarter, which month, which sprint an effort's going to meet that criteria, so that you can close it up. But closing out is really important too.
Right. I totally agree with you. You kind of also alluded to some of the delivery challenges that we're talking about, right? So I think, with, one of the biggest challenge around, empowered team and autonomous team is how we collaborate and how we know things change, because in each of the unit, things change quickly, and how we move collectively together is very challenging without spending a lot of time. I know that, one of the things I was talking to a friend of ours on, how the ratio of product managers to engineers have really changed a lot. During sort of like the waterfall era, one product manager typically has like a 10, 20 engineers, because you tell them what to do, they just go ahead and do it, right? And with the agile happening, the ratio has changed a lot. Like quite often, one product manager has a team of like 4 or 5 engineers, right? And it's kind of quote unquote your Scrum team. The reason is because the amount of the collaboration that both internally with your different other product managers and internally with your different business functions, the customer success and sales, and externally with your partners, your customers, has increased tremendously. Now, what happens is that if you don't have a good process and hopefully help you to automate things, to have visibility across board, then product manager, unfortunately, sometimes became more like a project manager. They just spend time to track down things and what's going on, try to mitigate the delivery risk. Or if they don't do it, then things gonna fall apart and you get nasty surprises. So develop a smart planning process. It's not gonna sit down, plan everything like a waterfall, right? But have to figure out, understand the key pieces of dependencies. Sometimes some teams create things called like a dual track agile. You do the discovery and then you do the building, so that in the discovery phase, people can align how we're going to go about it in a multiple team. And that would give you ability to have a high level alignment. And then obviously tracking, create a system using a tool. So will help you to track whether everyone is on track. You get alerted if someone else you dependent on has delays and changes, so that we can effectively mitigate the delivery risk. Because, if we don't deliver to our commitment, we can't really earn our trust to be fully empowered to create values and deliver value.
Yeah, the one thing too, Becky, here has to do with that visibility, like you said. Imagine if product managers and program managers didn't have to run around and try to gather all the information to get the QBR together to give an update on status of efforts. And if the information is there in one system where you could just view it, and you can spend the majority of your time, instead of prepping for the conversation, actually diving in, spending more time thinking about alternatives, thinking about ideation, getting feedback from the different viewpoints. That's really where you want to spend your time.
Right. Totally. And then just the last but not least is about the portfolio scenarios, which is a way to address the opportunity risk. Again, this is the reason is at the very end is one of the highest level of risk. And it really dependent on some of the things that we have to build upon first. But ultimately, what we need to understand is understand our strategic focus, understand how we prioritize things, understand where we are, so that when things change, not just change internally in your product and the scope and technology discovery and so on. A lot of times they change externally. I launched something, it was wildly successful. Do I continue building on that product or move on to something else that didn't really hit its original goal? So these are the things that really help a product organization to be a much better outcome focused and create a lot more value and faster in today's world. It's essential, right? So with that said, I think it would conclude our structured content. So I'm going to a bit on some of additional resources. Here you can find more information, and feel free to reach out, Cynthia and I, and we can get into Q&A.
Lovely, thank you. And I will share both of your contact information and LinkedIn profiles in the follow-up email, so those on the webinar can follow up directly. So please feel free to submit questions through the chat feature. We have a couple that have come in already, so I'll just go through the list. Becky, I think this one might have come from our just casual conversation at the beginning. So does managing portfolio risk lead to risk-averse leadership style and not taking bold moves?
Right, a good question. We talk about portfolio risk. That is a little different from managing individual teams taking risk. We all heard of something called, you don't put all eggs in one basket, because experimentation and expecting failure at a smaller scale, at an individual team scale, in the grand scheme of things, is acceptable. Imagine the whole ship, Titanic, fail. It's not good, right? So we can take a risk. We should take a risk as long as we know that worst case scenario is something we can accept as an organization. If we just blindly take a risk and not think about what's the worst case scenario, that is not smart. But if we know worst case scenario, we put additional measure around it so that we can take bold moves and without worrying about the sinking ship.
Yeah, there's probably two different thought processes there, right? One is sort of a generative, let's think of ideas, let's think of opportunities, let's assess them, and evaluative, okay, with these ideas, how do we compare it against what we know we're working on today? So getting that visibility gives you that foundation of confidence to be able to take a risk because you know what you would be giving up.
Right. And also the second part I want to also highlight is that as a product leader, especially if you're a CPO or running leading a product team, that you want your team to take a risk. But you need to watch out for that so they don't fail collectively because nobody really gave them the direction on where we're going. So in a way that being a product leader is very hard. You need to empower your team. You need to let them run. You need to give them, the freedom of create and innovate. But you also need to make sure they're not hurting or fail and a collective fail. So that's the balancing art, particularly for product leaders.
Yeah. Okay. And then Cynthia, I think this one's probably for you. So was the move from annual to quarterly to monthly planning an intentional move, or did it happen organically? And how can you drive this change internally with an executive team that might be resistant?
That's a good question. So definitely was organic. We could just see that we weren't moving fast enough with our decisions and prioritization. And so moving to a quarterly, you can take the same agenda that you have annually and just say, okay, we're going to do it on a quarterly basis, but we're going to shrink it down. If you have your list of top priorities and you can set an agenda on a quarterly saying, okay, let's just review how we're doing against these. So backward facing, you can give that information up front so people can review it before you get to your meetings together. And then in the time that you have together in a quarterly review, you want to spend that time in the discussion. How come that went off the rails? What can we do different? What are some learnings we can pull from it and introduce the new things that you think will come for the future? So the shift, if you can compare it to what's currently done, so it doesn't seem brand new, but that the phasing of it is more quarterly, that certainly will help. And you can also premise it with, well, let's try. We're going to do our annual review, say you do it at the beginning of January. So in April, let's just have a day to get together and minimize the amount of work that you need to get the content together. Obviously, if you're using a tool that has that information already available, then the product managers and the engineers can just give the updates on, what went well, what didn't go well, and where do we need your help and discussion, and then what are the future opportunities. It could be a pretty simple agenda.
Anything to add there, Becky?
Yeah, I totally agree with this, Cynthia, where the company feel like the need for speed is there. It's very organically, almost like a bottoms up, say, we need to plan more frequently. We need to have faster alignment because the world is changing so fast. And I also want to highlight, Cynthia mentioned it, I think it's really important is that when we make that change, it does also mean not only we just have more frequent meetings, that also means we need to have rapid access to information so that, in the past, you can do annual planning, you have offsites, you have big poster sheets everywhere, and afterwards you document all that stuff in the spreadsheet, in the PowerPoint. It won't work. You can't do that every quarter, right? That means the speed and the quality of access to information directly correlate to speed and quality of decision-making across broader audience. So having a tooling, having a source of truth that will help you to guide, give you visibility, give you data in front of you, it's essential because we can't go faster without changing how we work, right? That's more than just meetings. So I totally agree with you. And that's really having an organic bottoms up desire is much easier to succeed than coming from a top down saying, we're going to do X, Y, Z. So that's, I think that's really cool to hear.
And, organically, things will happen regardless, right? If the need is there, teams will find a way to figure out how to communicate and decide what priorities they should align with together. And so by having some formalization to say, we're going to do it on a quarterly, and then we'll do a check-in on a monthly basis is good. The other thing I've seen that works really well is decoupling the discovery from the delivery, right? So with product managers, you can have your vision and go after and getting that information separate from saying, okay, now we're going to commit to it for this quarter. And so you can have some space in time between discovering the opportunity and then saying, okay, now here's where we have to deliver it. That helps as well.
Right. That's what we call it, the double diamond for the strategy and execution, two faces. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of opportunity, I'll jump to this question. So what is an example of one of the biggest opportunity costs you've seen before?
Good question. I have an example of that. So opportunity costs. Think about a monolith piece of software that you're trying to break up into microservices, and that's using 80% of your engineering resources. What's the opportunity cost? You're going to miss out on the market for the next piece of functionality that your customers need. So that's one thing you have to keep an eye on, the infrastructure and that architecture versus the market and where it's headed. Becky, do you have an example?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting you mentioned that. It's something I was going to highlight as well, is that a lot of times the product managers, quote unquote, don't get involved in the tech debt. But it really, really makes a lot of sense when you think about it. I have also worked with the teams where, every time we take shortcut and not taking the, adjust the underlying system change to the point where you build everything, you have to work around it. You build everything, you have to work around it. You create a lot more bugs and a lot of issues. And then you cannot build innovative product anymore because you're limited by your tech architecture to only do incremental change. And that time, you have to completely rewrite everything and you get stuck. Then you basically have a long period of time not being able to ship features. So when your competitor just go swing. So the key thing here is that as the product leaders, you will look at both your product features and value delivered to external parties. Also think about what the underlying, the house you live in is going to be down the road. So if you start to see, kind of going back to the delivery risk, right? So you start to see there are lots of, tickets or tasks are in areas not part of your plan, not part of your epic. And then you need to really look into to say, are they production issues and bugs? Are they just waiting? Obviously, if they're waiting, we solve that by better planning and a better alignment. If they're production bugs, system bugs, you don't go fix all the bugs one by one. That potentially can indicate a different problem. If you can address these things earlier, that you would prevent opportunity risk down the road. But if you don't, and then you kind of just look at the things at hand, that would definitely cause a lot of downstream impact. That all the flood coming at once, that's a lot more problem than trickle down and solve them along the way.
Yeah. Okay. So next question is, what is the best way to manage a change in the business plan when a new opportunity is considered and approved?
Definitely. I can take that. I have an example of that. So if you think about change management, I think of the triangle delta, because if people are working off of a premise, they, say you've done your quarterly business review and the top 10 priorities are these, and then all of a sudden you have to swap one out for a different piece, like you have a merger and acquisition that you want to launch a new product against in 3 months. I've been through this scenario before over Christmas holidays, of course, or New Year's holidays. How do you go about managing that change? It has to be formal, it has to be communicated, and it has to address the heart, so people feel they're engaged in the new choice, and that's the important thing to do, that they can give up what they were working on It has to go with the head to give them the facts around, you know, what the challenge is, what the minimal viable product is, what the dates are. So a lot of it has to do with the communication through the organization, and not just once, right? It needs to be advocated. So people need to speak the same terminology as they advocate for this change, and speak again and again about the different, you know, the new opportunity that you're going after and why you're going after it. There will be hurdles, and so you've got to speak through, yeah, this is a challenge we have, and we're still committed to this new opportunity. What else do we need to do? What can we drop from scope? And look at the opportunity that way.
Right. And I want to just also tag on that as well. I think that Cynthia mentioned change management. It sounds like a big company thing. It's not. You could be just a 5-people company, a 5, you know, people engineering team. If something happened, whatever new opportunities, threat, and losing customer, that you need to change what your team working on. The process is the same, right? How you understand. So what is really important is, 1 is the process, and then 2 is how you make that decision. What we have control today is the process, and we should add more control to it, is access to information. The most important part is to understand, what are we trade off? If we do A, not B, what are we giving up? What is the potential evaluation look at here? And then that's number 1, right? Understand the trade-offs. The second part is to understand what other options we could have. Does it have to be existing team? Could be another team? Could we outsource it? Could we balance it? And that's where exactly portfolio management approach come into play, is that when you have a team, you have a portfolio. It could be 5-people team, it could be 5,000 people team. They are the same in that, how do I best leverage my existing team and resources to what we need to do? It could be a product MVP, like Cynthia said. It could be something we use external resources to build it. Maybe we can move our current development or our features to a different entity or team, external resources, so that we can focus on this one. Or we can even do manual workarounds to achieve the same customer needs, and so that we can buy us time. So understanding different options, understand what is the trade-off, it is really critical to respond to changes. And that, again, I can't stress enough, have a system, understand where you are. When we don't understand where we are, we can't make informed decisions. So we spend a lot of time just to understand, or we make sort of a knee-jerk reaction, which is even worse.
Yeah, that's a good point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the decision process itself, depending on the organization. So, you know, with a federal program which hits every aspect of an organization, the IT, the sales team, the compliance team, you know, DevOps team, the product, the network, everything, you know, making those decisions and knowing how to make those decisions and what information needs to be provided to make the decision. What are the impacts from the decision? And then communicate those to the people who are either impacted, or maybe they were already part of that conversation, but to communicate back to them to reiterate, we don't have a good memory. Let's use the tools to remember, so we don't have to remember. And communicate to stakeholders that may not be involved, but they might need to know, because later on they might have a dependency, like a messaging change on the website, for example, if a new piece of product goes out.
Awesome. Well, timing wise, that was perfect. We have a couple more questions that we can follow up with through email, but I really appreciate everybody joining today. And Cynthia, Becky, really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights, stories, feedback, and ideas.